Most people think they understand Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They are wrong, and the reason they are wrong is exactly the reason the book still matters. In its cultural afterlife, the story has been flattened into a moral cartoon. Good versus evil, restraint versus excess, civilization versus savagery. Jekyll becomes a tragic victim of curiosity. Hyde, an intruder who slips in through a crack. This reading is comforting. It preserves distance. It allows the reader to believe the danger lies elsewhere. In transgression, in loss of control, in becoming something one is not. But Stevenson's novel is not about losing control. It is about where control leads when it is mistaken for virtue. The real horror of the book is not that Jekyll unleashes something dark. It is that he does so deliberately, calmly, and with moral confidence. Hyde is not a failure of restraint. He is the product of a belief system, a philosophy that treats moral purity as achievable, desirable, and worth any cost. Stevenson's claim is brutal and unsentimental. The attempt to divide the self into clean moral categories does not eliminate cruelty. It concentrates it. This is not a story about evil breaking loose. It is a story about denial learning how to act. Victorian Britain was obsessed with legibility. Character was meant to be readable, encoded in profession, address, manners, dress, and domestic order. Respectability functioned as a moral credential. If you looked right and occupied the proper institutions, your virtue was assumed. The private self did not need to be examined so long as the public self performed. This was not simple hypocrisy. It was a system, a way of organizing moral life so that responsibility could be outsourced to appearances. And it worked precisely because it allowed people to believe they were good without ever having to ask what that goodness demanded of them. Stevenson lived inside this contradiction. He inhabited a culture that demanded coherence from human beings at the exact moment coherence was becoming impossible. Scientific discoveries unsettled religious certainty. Cities expanded faster than accountability. Empire projected confidence while quietly fearing decline. The Victorian subject was expected to appear unified, upright, and self-possessed, even as every structure that once guaranteed those qualities began to erode. The danger Stevenson identifies is not contradiction. It is the refusal to admit contradiction as a moral fact. Dr. Jekyll is not naive. He is not confused. He is not a good man undone by curiosity. He is one of the most self-aware characters in 19th century fiction. He knows exactly what kind of man he is. From the beginning, Jekyll understands that his life is divided. He enjoys reputation, charity, professional esteem, and he enjoys pleasures that cannot coexist with that image. Crucially, he does not describe this tension as tragic or mysterious. He describes it as inconvenient, a problem of management. Here lies the ethical core of the novel. Jekyll assumes that the existence of incompatible impulses is itself immoral. He does not ask how to live responsibly with them. He asks how to extract them. His experiment is not an act of exploration. It is an act of sanitation. Jekyll wants to be good without remainder. He wants a version of himself untouched by appetite, compromise, or shame. He imagines morality as something that can be purified through separation, as though responsibility were a contaminant rather than a condition of action. This is not repression. Repression would at least acknowledge conflict. What Jekyll practices is moral laundering. Edward Hyde is born from this fantasy. And here, Stevenson makes his most unsettling move. Hyde is not Jekyll's opposite. He is Jekyll's residue. Hyde is not grand, seductive, or ideologically driven. He does not tempt. He does not argue. He does not persuade. He is smaller, younger, underdeveloped, described repeatedly as deformed, unfinished, vaguely wrong. People recoil from him without being able to articulate why. This is deliberate. Hyde is terrifying not because he is monstrous, but because he is unaccountable. He harms casually. He destroys without explanation. He does not justify himself, not because he believes himself right, but because justification no longer applies. Hyde is desire severed from consequence, action without moral memory, appetite without context. And this is the crucial point. Hyde does not feel guilty because guilt belongs to a moral framework he has been engineered to escape. Jekyll believes that by externalizing his worse impulses, he can preserve an innocent self. What he actually creates is a being who is innocent in the most horrifying sense of the word, untouched by responsibility. Stevenson sharpens this horror by refusing to specify the full nature of Hyde's private pleasures. We are given violence, but the indulgences that motivate Hyde remain vague, hinted at, withdrawn, never catalogued. This is not Victorian coyness. It is strategy. By withholding detail, Stevenson forces the reader to collaborate. Hyde becomes a container. Whatever your culture fears, whatever your conscience suppresses, whatever your respectability requires you not to name, that is what Hyde is doing when the door closes. The novel does not allow you to point at Hyde and say, "That is what evil looks like." It asks a more dangerous question. What would you look like if you believed your actions no longer counted as yours? Hyde's physical form reinforces this argument. He is repeatedly described as dwarfed, embryonic, malformed. This is not Gothic ornamentation. It is diagnosis. Stevenson suggests that impulses denied a legitimate place within the self do not disappear. They grow without education, without restraint, without ethical language. They mature in isolation, and when they finally surface, they do so without proportion. Hyde is not excessive because he desires too much. He is excessive because he has never learned how to desire responsibly. No one has ever asked him to answer for himself. Jekyll does not discipline his darker impulses. He abandons them. And abandonment, Stevenson implies, is a far greater cruelty than restraint. The structure of the novel mirrors this moral blindness. For much of the story, Jekyll remains absent, shielded by letters, documents, and the testimonies of respectable men. The narrative unfolds through lawyers and gentlemen trained to trust institutions, reputations, and written assurances. They believe order is self-maintaining, that if something were truly wrong, it would announce itself through the proper channels. This is not stupidity. It is moral outsourcing. These men are not blind. They simply believe that virtue correlates with position, and that harm cannot originate from the respectable without becoming visible as scandal. Their faith in appearances creates the very space Hyde needs to operate. By the time Jekyll's confession appears, the shock is not in what is revealed, but in how long it was possible not to know. The novel exposes not a hidden truth, but a habit of looking away. Respectability, Stevenson suggests, is not the opposite of violence. It is often its camouflage. This is why readings of the novel as a warning about scientific hubris miss the point entirely. Science does not corrupt Jekyll. It enables his rationalization. The potion does not introduce a new desire. It provides a technical excuse to disown an old one. The danger Stevenson identifies is not knowledge. It's the use of intellect to escape moral continuity, to believe cleverness can absolve. When Hyde begins to emerge without the potion, the novel refuses supernatural melodrama. This is not divine punishment. It is momentum. What is indulged without accountability gains force. What is denied integration loses authority. Hyde does not overthrow Jekyll through strength. He replaces him through habit, through repetition, through attrition. There is no synthesis at the end, no moral epiphany that restores balance. Jekyll's confession offers explanation, not redemption. The house empties. The voice stops. And that is the final cruelty of the novel. It denies consolation. It refuses to reassure the reader that awareness is enough. Stevenson's most radical claim is not that human beings harbor destructive impulses. That was never controversial. His claim is that the demand for innocence, the insistence that goodness must remain uncontaminated in order to be real, is itself a form of violence. Moral purity fractures responsibility. It creates selves who act without ownership, institutions that harm without guilt, systems that destroy while insisting on their own righteousness. Hyde does not exist because human beings are evil. He exists because they insist they are not. And once that insistence becomes doctrine, no potion is required, no laboratory, no dramatic transformation. The change unfolds quietly behind closed doors, under respectable names, within lives that look, on the surface, entirely decent. Until one day the self that was meant to be preserved can no longer be found at all. And what remains does not feel monstrous. It feels justified. So let me ask you this. What do we gain by pretending some of our own actions don't belong to us?